Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. Well, unfortunately, cold and flu season has found us, and so we were unable to record a new show this week. However, we have a great show that was aired first in 2017 that will help keep your holiday season safe. We hope that you enjoy it, and we also hope that you go out and get your flu shot and your COVID booster to keep your holiday season healthy.
So this time of year, it's a great time to support your local farms by buying a locally grown Christmas tree. But there are a lot of steps that you need to take if you're using a live Christmas tree versus one of those artificial trees. Artificial trees are low maintenance. They're also low fire hazard because they're treated with a fire retardant. But they don't have that wonderful fresh scent that a freshly grown Christmas tree will bring to your home.
I like how you put that, Karen. One of them artificial Christmas trees.
All right. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have the right type of stand for a real Christmas tree. You can't use the same kind of stand. It has to have a reservoir for water. Trees need water after they've been cut in order to stay moist. And the main reason you need to care for your Christmas tree is to keep it from becoming a fire hazard. A dry Christmas tree is a huge, huge fire hazard. And once they are dry, they can ignite in seconds. And there are horrible fires that happen around this time of year because people do not properly water their real Christmas trees. So we just want to make sure that you know the right steps, and we hope that you will share those right steps with someone that you talk to that you know has a real Christmas tree to try and keep everybody safe this holiday season. You want to make sure your stand is big enough to provide 1 quart of water per inch of stem diameter, and so it needs to have a fairly big reservoir in it. And you also need to make sure that you can keep track of that water. So you need to be able to either get under the tree, have your kids get under there and check it, or to make sure that you are checking it every day and ensuring that there is water in that stand.
Yeah, and another thing with that stand is you want to make sure it actually fits the tree. You don't want to start whittling the sides like a pencil and trying to get it into one of those stands because they're not going to be designed to hold up something that heavy or tall. So you wouldn't be wrong with making sure you have a nice large diameter base so it doesn't topple over. So if it's unstable, those stands typically aren't very expensive, and I would recommend going with a safer one.
Yeah, and another thing, when you consider whittling down the sides of the tree, the active layers of the tree are right under that bark layer. So once you take off those layers, you're essentially removing the circulatory system of the tree. The center of the tree does not take up water like the outer edges do. And so you have to make sure that the bark is intact at the base of the tree.
That's a great point. Absolutely right. Yeah, that phloem and xylem tissue is really close to the outside of the bark, exactly. And that's so if you start whittling that, you're not going to get any water up there, and then it becomes a fire hazard at that point.
Yeah, and the old nomenclature said you just drill a hole up the center of the tree and it will open up more surface area so that the tree can absorb water. But that's not how trees work. The trees only absorb water on that outer layer or right inside the bark. So don't bother drilling a hole in the bottom of your tree. It's not going to do any good.
Yeah, that's right, Karen. It's a passive flow of water. When we're talking about water uptakes, it's going to be water kind of coming into the plant through osmotic potentials, which means the plant's producing sugars and salts and everything, and that's going to draw the water in. And as it goes up, you have the capillary effect through those circulatory systems that are kind of outside, closer to the bark, and that water will evaporate and kind of making almost a siphoning effect and pulling up more water. So if you get rid of those channels, you're not going to get any water uptake, and it'll start drying the trees a lot faster. I know something I've heard before, Karen. Somebody said, Dan, hey, I heard it's good to put a little bit of sugar into the water basin of my Christmas tree. And I recommended against such a thing. And the reason is because of that exact process that I just described. When you add solutes, stuff like salts and sugars, and it dissolves in water, what you're doing is you're increasing that water potential to draw that water back down. So if you put too much solutes in there, if you're putting too much sugar, too much salt, what's going to happen is instead of that water going up the tree, it's going to pull it down, and it's actually going to dry it. Just like, when we talk about salting driveways and things, if you're using too much salt, what you're doing essentially is you're drying off all the grass and all the plants next to where you're salting, and that can create, and that causes problems in the spring because all those salts need to wash out before anything grows in there. So I would recommend pure water and nothing, don't try to get all fancy with sugar and salt, because that's just not going to, that could put you in a bad situation and cause a dry tree, which can be dangerous.
Yeah, really the best thing you can do to help with the water uptake from the tree is to make sure you have open transpiration channels. So you want to make sure you have a very fresh cut on the bottom of that tree. When you get your tree, have the tree company cut the bottom 2 inches of that trunk off for you, or cut it off when you get home. That is going to open up all of the new tissue at the bottom of the tree, which is going to improve that circulation. However, you have got to get it into water as soon as possible after that cut happens. The faster you can get it into water, the better your long-term circulation for the tree will be. Another thing that you should try to avoid is dropping the tree down hard on the base of the trunk, because that's going to smash closed all of those cells that you just opened. So be very gentle with the base of your tree after it gets that final cut on it. In fact, if you know that you're going to be banging it around, try to do the cut at home right before you put it into the stand.
Yeah, and I was going to say, what's going to be gentler than an axe cut would be a saw cut. So use a hand saw, make sure you get a nice clean cut in there and you're not smashing up that tissue right above it. You're right, because then you're compressing all those channels down and there's no water that's going to be able to come up. So I would recommend a saw cut.
Yeah, I'll second that. A saw cut would probably be better. The fresh cut is really the key. And also make sure that you don't allow the base of that tree to get dirty as well. So if you're going to be setting it down in a mud puddle, you're going to need to clean that dirt off of those or give yourself another cut. And at that point, you can just cut like a little 1/4 inch sliver off just to refresh those openings.
Yeah, and if you are buying a Christmas tree and they're cutting it on site there, you got your cut right there, as long as you come straight back home and set it up, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, it doesn't have to be immediate. You've got about 6 hours before you start to lose that. Well, actually, 2 hours is when it really starts to go downhill. But if you can get it in water within 6 to 8 hours, you should be good. So don't, go shopping after you get your Christmas tree. Go shopping, then get your Christmas tree, then go home and get it in some water.
Yeah, but how are you going to know what ornaments to buy, Karen? No, I'm just kidding. No, great advice there. Yeah, get it up and then figure out, heck, you might have enough Christmas ornaments from the year before. So we were talking about water. So what about the temperature? Does that matter?
Oh, temperature is hugely critical, because if you have your tree, say, next to the fireplace, the heat from the fireplace is going to more rapidly dry out the tree. Another thing that adds temperature to your tree is lights. The newer lights are much cooler than those big old bulbs that we had in the 80s. The new LED lights are very cool, and never ever use real candles on a tree unless you have 3 fire extinguishers right there and you're staring at the tree the whole time. I know this is an old tradition and a lot of people do enjoy those live candles on the tree. However, it is very dangerous, and you have to have a fire extinguisher right next to you while they are lit. And when you do that, we recommend that you just do it one time, like that Christmas morning light, and then leave it be.
I mean, that's great, but I was referring to the water temperature.
Well, your water should be basically room temperature. It doesn't need to be warm or cold or anything special like that. Just room temperature water is just fine. If you have really hard water where you live, be a little more careful and watch the calcification build up inside that tree reservoir, because like Dan was saying earlier, that could add salts to that system that are a little more than you would want. So if you start to see that white crusty stuff on the top edge of your tree reservoir, maybe pop your tree out into a bucket, scrub it out with some vinegar to break down those salts, and then rinse it really well, and then put your tree back in there.
I mean, honestly, if I was concerned about hard water like that, I would just go ahead and buy a couple jugs of distilled water.
Yeah.
I mean, and then maybe like...
That would be a lot easier than moving the tree after you decorate it.
Well, yeah, and it's it's something you could probably get away with at the beginning, and then as you're refilling that water basin, because you got to keep an eye on it, then you could probably start using tap water, and then they wouldn't have enough time to get too hard and too calcified to block any channels or anything like that. So speaking of, you want to make sure you check daily the water level. Just get in the habit of doing that so you don't forget. You do not want the water to go below the base of the tree. So where you have that cup, just make sure it's always in the water and it's always taking up that water and maintaining that flow that I was telling you about, that wicking process, so you don't get an area of dryness, and that could cause all those kinds of problems. But with many stands, there can be water in the stand, even though the base of the tree is no longer submerged in water. So again, just keep an eye out and make sure that with the part that you have cut is actually in the water.
And that is critical importance.
Kind of defeats the purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's just like having a flower vase with flowers in it. If the water's below the bottom of the flowers are not getting any of that water. It's the same for your tree. Your tree is just a little harder to observe. So yeah, definitely important. And Dan had mentioned earlier about ornaments and what you put on your tree. And this, again, is really important. You're making sure that you keep really close eye on the quality of what you're putting on the tree as far as your lights. A frayed electrical cord on your lights could cause a fire. So make sure that you are thoroughly inspecting your light strands before you put them on. Stretch them out. If there's a flicker or, you've got a bad bulb, there's a break in the wire, make sure that you know what's causing that flicker. Try replacing the bulbs. If this still has a flicker in it, you probably have a broken wire somewhere, which could potentially cause a fire. And it's much cheaper to buy a new set of lights than to pay for your home again.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure the stuff that you would lose that you can't replace anyway just wouldn't be worth it at all. So yeah, just take a look at those wires, and there's electrical tape also. So if it's something small, probably some electrical tape might be fine. Just keep an eye on that stuff. And if you're unsure about something, Karen's right. Safety first. Just think about the possible consequences. And if you're not willing to pay for the possible consequences of such an action, then you probably just need to avoid it altogether. So, and those newer lights, like Karen was saying, those are LEDs. They're going to absorb less energy, and they might pay for themselves in terms of energy costs.
Yeah, and another thing you want to watch for on those strands is making sure that the wires don't get warm. If they're warm to the touch, that means something isn't working properly. There's a load problem inside the wiring system. And again, that is a signal that you should just let go of that strand of lights, take it to the recycling yard or something, and get yourself some new lights. It's fun to buy new stuff, so just buy the ones that are making you safe. And when you're out shopping, if you did not change your smoke detector batteries at daylight savings time, then you need to put them in now. The holidays are the number one season for fires. Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's are the top fire days, and that's very unfortunate. You don't want that to be in your holiday season, so make sure you're taking all those precautions and that your smoke detectors are working properly.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And the kids are going to want to be next to the Christmas tree the whole time. And if it's chilly, they're going to want the space heater there. Just keep all that stuff in mind. What Karen was saying was right. You get the space heater and fireplace and all that stuff. Yeah, it looks beautiful aesthetically, right? Oh, I mean, that's like a painting right there. It's a postcard. But yeah, you're drying out that tree. If you're not keeping an eye out on the water, things can happen just as long as just maintain awareness of everything, and hopefully nothing will be a problem. But that temperature is going to heat up. It's going to cause a tree to maybe photosynthesize a little bit faster. The water is going to be evaporating quicker. And then if it's gone, then the tree is drying and you got all that heat coming in.
Right. So what you're looking at is preventing that full triangle from forming. Your fire triangle is heat, fuel, and ignition. And as long as you can keep one of those things gone, then you will not have a fire. So you want to try to keep, you have fuel because you have a wooden tree with needles on it. It's full of pine resins, which are highly flammable. So you have a fuel. So you want to reduce the heat and remove any ignition sources. So that's your job to keep your family safe. And another thing that a lot of people don't consider when they're putting up their Christmas tree as far as heat sources is windows. We think windows are drafty in the winter, but sunlight does come in through those windows. It's going to cause your tree to photosynthesize, which is going to use more water to do, and it can dry out your tree faster. So if you can locate your tree out of direct sunlight, that again is just another step you can take for a precaution.
Yeah, and I'm going to get a little bit off topic here, but you mentioned it before. You're talking about flowers and vases and stuff. Flowers don't really need to have light. If anything, the light's just going to damage the flower. So, you could put those anywhere you want. They don't have to be on the windowsill or anything. They don't need light. The only thing that needs light are leaves. So anything vegetative. But so Karen's absolutely right. If that tree is there, and I know winter in Ohio, there's like no sun for the next 3 months pretty much. But on those rare days when you do see the sunshine, yeah, it's going to cause that tree to photosynthesize more. It does produce heat. The infrared, which is the longer wavelengths, will actually go through the window and heat up things. So yeah, on a very sunny day, you're going to have some heat produced, and that could cause some more metabolism in the plant, increased photosynthesis, less water available. So let's kind of move on to one of our other points here. Do not overload electrical circuits. So I know if you get a nice big tree, it has a lot of light requirements, but just try to make sure that you're not overloading those circuits. They have those what am I trying to say? The power strips. Yeah, don't daisy chain power strips. That's a horrible idea. If you have one power strip, there you go. Don't put two power strips together.
Yeah, and know that there is a difference between a power strip and a breaker. So if you buy a good quality breaker with multiple outlets on it, it will pop and turn off before a fire can happen. But a power strip, even if it has a little light on it that you can turn on and off, that's just to turn the power strip on and off. That is not a circuit breaker. So make sure the power strip you are buying does have a circuit breaker in it. It should have a test button if it does. So if it does not have a test button, it does not have a circuit breaker. And then you only want to have one of those per outlet. You do not want to double up on your outlet, because remember, your outlet's only got so much capability. So if you're putting your hand on the wire coming out of the wall underneath the power outlet and you feel heat there, you have too much energy going through that source, and you need to spread it around into different outlets.
So what about after the tree, Karen? Should we just burn it, in the stove and heat up our houses and stuff? I mean, it's there.
Well, while Christmas trees are highly flammable because they have those pine resins, anytime you burn fresh wood in a fireplace or a wood stove, you are actually causing a large amount of creosote to accumulate inside your home. And creosote is poisonous, and it can catch fire inside of your chimney. So if you burn green wood or wood that has not been adequately dried for 3 to 6 months, then you could be causing another fire hazard.
So 3 to 6 months really isn't enough time to do it after Christmas, is it?
Now, maybe you could, burn it next year.
There we go. Or you can, there are places that will recycle trees. And if you have a pond, you can always throw the Christmas tree in your pond as a habitat for fish. And I know it's like an old school thing, but it does create a habitat.
Yeah, the Department of Natural Resources often collects a number of trees to put into large reservoirs to create fish habitat. So contact a local Department of Natural Resources, see if they're collecting trees. Your city may have a municipal pickup for trees. I know the city of Wheeling does. But yeah, you definitely don't want to burn it. And you want to take the tree out of your house as soon as possible after Christmas. If you're one of those people that likes to leave your Christmas tree up till Elvis's birthday, then you want to make sure... That was our family saying. It was so mid-February or whatever.
Okay, I was about to say, I'm not sure when that is.
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure. I just know it's mid-February because we left our tree up a long time. But if you're one of those people, as soon as you start to see the needles fall from the tree, it needs to get out of your house, because at that point, it is a fire hazard. If the needles are falling off the tree, it needs to go out of your house. So, when you first bring it home, you really want to give it a good solid shake. If you get it from a Christmas tree farm and they have a tree shaker, use it because that's going to shake out any insects that might be hiding in it, any spiders, so you don't bring them into your house. But sometimes when you do bring a live tree into the house, you will have maybe an explosion of miniature praying mantises come out through your house, or some other insects But I will say that they're going to be short-lived, and make sure you're never spraying an aerosol pesticide onto your Christmas tree, because that, again, is just asking for a fire. So these insects are temporary. They're going to desiccate rather quickly in your winter home. They need a lot of moisture to live. They usually hatch in the spring. They're just confused because it was cold and then it was warm. So it's a very temporary thing, and don't worry about them.
Yeah, so just give it a little inspection. And if you're really worried about it, I would say maybe even some 7 dust or something. It would get rid of some of the insects. Come on, Karen.
How about a vacuum cleaner?
A vacuum cleaner, but
I'm not an advocate for spreading pesticides inside the house.
I'm just saying it's outside.
So what you want to do is you want to make sure you shake the tree vigorously. If you can get the tree company to shake it for you, have that. Otherwise, let the kids get some Christmas frustrations out on that tree. Shake it really well. Take out any bird nests or anything. While they might be pretty, they often carry mites and things that you do not want in your house. And then when you bring it in, again, make sure that base is clean. It's got a fresh cut on it, and get it right in some water. Now, if you're getting one of the bald and burlap trees, and we got to go quick through this because we're running out of time, again, you want to make sure it has adequate water, and know that those trees are going to be super heavy. A 6-foot tree is going to weigh 250 pounds. So if you don't want to carry that around, gently carry it around, because you do have to be gentle if you're planning on planting it, then you may want to skip that or get a much smaller tree. So if you're doing a bald and burlap tree, make sure, again, you are not allowing it to sit in direct sunlight. Keep it in the shade. Keep it cool. Don't let it freeze. Now, your root ball cannot just sit in a bucket of water, because that is going to suffocate the roots. It has to have access to air. So you're going to need to moisten your root ball frequently, but don't flood it. So you're going to need to moisten it really well, and then maybe wrap it up with plastic while it's in the house, and then just test it frequently. And if you are using lights on a live tree that you're planning on planting, make sure they're not high heat lights. And as soon as the ground is unfrozen, you need to go ahead and plant it. You can store it in a cool, dark garage or something like that over the winter if the ground's really frozen. But if we get a warm up or a thaw, go ahead and throw it in the ground. It's not going to hurt it. But you may need to stabilize it with some ropes until it gets those roots out.
That's right. And make sure you remove the burlap when you do plant it. And that would be an option if you wanted to, when we say recycle, to actually plant it and have a new tree. So you got your Christmas tree inside, and then the tree gets to live outside, so it never leaves your home.
But keep in mind, say you're getting a little beautiful Colorado blue spruce, and you're going to put it outside in your yard, and you're going to be environmentally responsible, and you plant it 3 feet from your house. Well, when it's little, 3 feet from your house is fine. But this tree gets to be over 200 feet tall and over 12-foot branch diameter.
If you planted it correctly. Right.
If you plant it directly and it doesn't have any problems, yes. Full-grown tree, we're talking. The Colorado blue spruce is a gigantic tree, and you need to make sure, unless you are planning on pruning it regularly, which it does respond well to and makes a nice shrub, but you have to prune it every year. If you're not planning on pruning it, it will become a tree, and it will take over your yard. And so with that, we are out of time. Right tree, right place, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.